Currently, it is 5:14 in the morning. It is Friday, September 15th. I am hoping, yep, you can see that, right? It's very early in the morning, and it's not because your boy woke up very early. It's because your boy stayed up so goddamn late. Basically, what happened today, I woke up at like 10 a.m. It was very, very early morning. I got my coffee, sat down in my chair, I coached some people, and then I just got to streaming. Streamed like 10, 13 hours of TFT, got socialed out, but I was like, I gotta keep grinding TFT, and I'm grinding a lot of games in the TFT. Again, it's 9.5 dropped 2 days ago, and I'm grinding out a lot of games. And the reason why is because we were fortunately lucky enough to be selected to be participating in boxbox's bootcamp for sett 9.5, a huge $25,000 prize pool that is going to be spread amongst a lot of the top players inside of each of the leagues. We are actually inside of the pro league, which is a lot of really crazy players in here. We got players like Becca, players like Asa, DQA, DPay, K3 Soju. I'm just going off the names and just picking out whoever I recognize. Prestivan, Pitsy, Sub-Zero Arc, another TFT YouTuber, which is super dope. Spicy Appies, Robin Songs, Dish Soap. Again, like a lot of crazy names are in this competition. So we have a lot on our plate. And so, you know, being very fortunately enough to be selected for the Pro League, I really want to give my best and give my all. And today, we grinded a lot. It is day 2 of the set being launched. Well, technically now the morning of day 3, but we have finally gotten back into Masters in 46 games, and we are going to continue grinding as soon as I wake up the next day. But anyways, I know today we are going to talk about a lot of the strongest early games. I don't know if you can see the tabs up here. We have a bunch of different things and different openers to talk about. But before we talk about it, real quick, I am very aware that one, I'm talking very quietly because my roommate's asleep. I'm trying to be considerate, okay? I'm not trying to be all hullapalooza, okay? While the boy is sleeping, all right? We gotta let the roommate rest. He deals with enough of my shit. He probably hears me screaming through the walls all the time. I feel bad. Sean, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, man. Anyways, before we start today in the comps, not comps list, by the way, this is an specific openers early game boards that you could be looking for in your early game to try to play for HP preservation, win streaks, and stuff like that, okay? But yes, I'm aware. Later today and this afternoon, there is going to be a B patch, but I don't think this B patch will heavily affect this early game comps and early game boards to be looking for to try to play for that HP preservation. I could be wrong. That's okay. And if I find myself to be wrong, I will update in the comments below, a pinned comment. But again, I am 90, I would say 98% positive that the changes that are coming about, I'm assuming the changes, by the way, are probably just going to be pretty hard bilge water nerfs in terms of the way that the traits work, maybe scaling damage instead of flat damage, a bunch of other things that are going through, but it's nothing that is too major besides the bilge water. Bilge water is just a really big one that everyone's talking about right now. There's definitely going to still be things that are off balance and stuff. It's the first patch of the set, okay? Give the devs a bit of a break. But anyways, I don't think that's going to heavily affect what we're going to talk about today. So, but again, if it does, I'll pin a comment. But let's get on to the video because we got a lot to talk about. So first one here, let's talk about the strongest early game openers, and the first one here is Milio, Cassiopeia, and some bastions for your front line. Now this is sort of an opener that I almost always try to default if I can. It's because one, a lot of early game bastion units, Poppy, Alawi, Cassin, these are all very easy to find in the early game, but also Milio, Cassiopeia, it's very easy to find these to start if you just don't level at 2-1 and you happen to have a pair of each, or maybe you just upgrade them naturally, which would be super dope. I think both of them have their merits in terms of being a carry. You usually just itemize whichever one is just upgraded, but my personal preference is actually Milio, and it's one specific reason. The reason why is this, because I do like the default with the Bastion frontline. Milio is actually such a surprisingly strong unit for a 2-star, so he's constantly throwing the ball, and the CC is just so nice, and that CC stun actually can help determine the end of the fight. It's actually insane how impactful it is. But as the game progresses and you move along, you can actually start to find units like Nico to replace the Alawi here, and you get the Ich style hex. And if it's wind or fire, sometimes it's in really nice hexes like in here in A1, A2, or sorry, D1, D2, D7, D6. Really nice to just be able to just throw the ball at like 60% extra bonus attack speed or just extra bonus damage. It does so much extra damage. It's super nice. Obviously, you don't have to play Milio inside the hex. You can obviously have the Cassiopeia here too if you happen to find the Cassiopeia 2 here, and you can still play around this line. But just from what I've experienced, because especially the wind one, Milio just gets the cast ability just so often inside the wind hex here. It's just so strong. You can actually usually carry Milio all the way throughout stage 3. As long as he's 2-star and he's like itemized, semi-properly. So definitely something to consider for your early game. Next one I want to talk about is Samira, Cassiopeia, and Swing. This is the Noxus opener. This is an opener that I would not play or default to. It's an opener you really only play if you have like Samira 2-star and Cassiopeia 2-star. If they're not 2-star, I would not really recommend this. Noxus has definitely fallen off quite a bit. It's just not as strong as what it used to be. Nowadays, you really want like one, if not both of these upgraded in your backline, and then like some level of frontline. You sometimes don't even really need to play Noxus in the early game. There is this sort of idea that you want to be stacking Noxus in the early game as soon as possible, but what people have sort of realized that there's actually sort of a couple of like outs, if you will, when it comes to the Noxus stacking. What I mean by this is one, Mordekaiser is actually such a strong unit in the meta right now. He's kind of being overshadowed by how strong Bilgewater is, but I actually default Mordekaiser like the majority of my games, and Mordekaiser is a terrifically strong unit, especially 2-star with 3 items like RFC and like Nash's Tooth and stuff like that. But because he's so strong, you actually start to win fights even without any of the Noxus stacks during like stage 4, stage 5, even stage 6. And actually, if you tech into Noxus even super late, if people are already died off in the game, you just get those stacks automatically, so you don't even have to really worry too much. If you're pivoting super late into Noxus, it's fine, you'll probably end up finding it anyways, especially if you're pivoting into Noxus so late. It's probably because that is your strongest board. I don't know if that's really what the devs intended with Noxus, but I mean, it's just how it is. But again, still really strong opener if you have these in the early game. Cassiopeia 2 is, in my opinion, the better carry of the two. You don't have to play into Fury here. You can actually play something like Invokers instead. Again, Invokers, you might notice, especially Cassiopeia, is such a strong unit because of the way that her ability works, where she wounds a target and then she does bonus damage to wounded targets, so it's really insane. But you can even do something like this, and this is fine as well. If you have 80 items, obviously you lean within the Fury and the Samira. That's totally okay, but still something really strong to consider. Finally, the last one I really want to talk about is Void. I think Void is actually just a lot stronger than people realize, especially the vertical tree. If you're playing in realms like sort of the Placidium library, where you get the tome, or you get a trait of your choosing, or something like even Dreaming Pool, Ionia specifically is really great for Void. The reason it's so great is because you sort of have a very easy way to either get the emblem or an easy way to find Bel'Veth, right? In general, I wouldn't say Void emblem is an auto pick, but if you're able to get the Baron is surprisingly really strong. And if you look into the stats, you know what, I can pull it up for you right now, why not? But if we look into the stats right now, I'm going to keep it into Diamond Plus because there's still some really strong players inside of Diamond at the moment. But if we just look into 8 Void right now, it averages a 3.47. It's really strong. Even if you split it by star level here, as long as you manage to get that Kai'Sa 2, you're pretty much cruising. Bel'Veth 1, it's a little awkward, averages like a 4, but it's still not bad at all, 4.1. And then if you get Bel'Veth 2, you're looking at 2.45. So really good stuff. In case you're ever curious, the Void emblem holder is usually something like a Fiora, that way you get the challengers in, but you can flex around a lot, see what you like, see what you don't like, totally okay. But Void vertical is really strong in general, so if you get that early Void start, it's really nice to play into this. And then if you want, you can even try to pivot into something like Sorks as the game progresses. You drop the Cho'Gath, right? You play into something like the Vel'Koz here, and then multicasters here, and then maybe into the Force Sork, you want to fill it out with the Bastions and the Taric here, stuff like this. It's Void and Sorks plays out very similarly as it did in set 9, so if you play any of set 9, this should be very easy peasy and not too difficult for you to piece together as you progress throughout the game. But again, I apologize for this isn't supposed to be like ASMR, but again, it's very late in the, early in the morning, if you will, so I really don't want to wake up my roommate just to be safe, just to be considerate. But moving on, now sometimes in the game you will find yourself getting early 2-star 2 costs. Like maybe you have an early duplicator, like an early shitter Nico, and you want to just use that on one of your shitters and get a 2-star upgrade and tempo with it. That's totally okay, very viable. And let's talk a little bit about what to do if you find some of these very notable 2-star 2 costs. The first one I want to talk about is Sett 2. Sett 2 is great for 2 reasons. One, the boss, which the boss is just his carry augment, which is a very strong augment to play around. I might do a whole video just talking about the boss in general, because I think this augment has a lot of very cool nuances and just things to note when playing this. You can reroll for Sett 3, you can also tempo it to go fast 9. Really cool ways to approach it, but it's not always necessary. You don't need the boss to play Sett 3, and that's what I want to talk about in the second version, where there's actually a bunch of different boards that utilize Sett 3, specifically Twisted Fate reroll and also Talia reroll. Now there's a bunch of different variations of this. The most notable one, and I think the most commonly well-known one, is the Talia Double Trouble board, where you are playing around double Talia, double Sett, and double Twisted Fate. So your board looks something like this once you have everything figured out, right? Something like this. And it's a very cool board, very solid board, and even in the current meta, it's very, very great. But I know that even though in the current meta, it's still a very solid board, you won't always be able to play that. Instead, sometimes you might find yourself playing Twisted Fate reroll. Now, this is one of those things that might change. When you might notice anything that pertains to Bilgewater, very good chance that it might affect the way that we talk about, this might change within 12 hours, so take this with a grain of salt. But again, I don't think it'll change it too much. But currently, the way that you play Twisted Fate reroll in this current patch is that you are actually kind of trying to play into Bilgewater, specifically vertically. So what ends up happening is that you tempo, try to get that Twisted Fate to set 3 by around 4-2, and your board usually fills out with a bunch of Bilgewater units like the Alawi, or actually even the Graves, because the CC is really nice with this chill, the Nautilus for the Juggernauts, and maybe even something like Shurima, like the Darkin or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Even Nasus is fine here. Doesn't really matter. But the idea is that once you get these guys 3-starred, you just start teching in more and more Bilgewater, and because Bilgewater is just so strong at the moment, this is sort of how you play out the board. I don't think this is going to stay like this for obvious reasons. Bilgewater is very, very strong. It's very possible for multicaster might be the better version. I don't think it will be. Just a heads up. But instead, you might just, instead of 5 Bilgewater, tech out of these boys, and then you just play more into the Juggernauts. That way you have a bit more of a meteor and thicker front line, if you will. But yeah, keep it in mind. Still very strong comp. You can even do something like Strategist is totally fine as well, just to keep something like this, and maybe drop this, and maybe some more Strategists with like the Seer. Even you can play into 3, even 4 Strategists. Maybe something like this as the game progresses. That's totally viable. Strategist is very, very great for flex in general. I'm getting a bit sidetracked here, but you get the idea. TF, don't sleep on it. Very strong unit. In general, Shojin +2 is great, but blue buff is great on him as well. Just play it by ear, but just itemize him like he's an AP caster, not like an attack speed AP carry like he was back in set 8. Okay, moving on. Next one here. Again, this is just the TF board. But moving on here, we have the Soraka 2 as well as Milio. This is very similar to actually just Invokers at the beginning. You just have Soraka 2, and just make sure that if you have Soraka 2, you itemize her over a Cassio 2 or Milio 2. In general, I do think Soraka 2 is just so much better as an item carrier if you find it, because she is just so stable, and again, plays very, very nicely into the bastions here, and it's a very easy way for you to just play throughout the mid game, and then eventually have to tech out of them and play into something else. But still, very, very solid board, very great way for you to preserve your HP throughout the early game. There's not much else that needs to be said here. Moving on here, we also have the Warwick 2 carry. Now, I don't know too much about this, to be honest. This is something that has sort of popped up on my radar about, I want to say, about 12 to 16 hours ago. It's a relatively sort of new thing I've noticed. I don't see a lot of people playing it, and for good reason. The reason why is because this sort of is like, hey, if you have a Ginsu slam, you slam it on Warwick. And actually, surprisingly enough, I haven't 2-starred here, but I've even seen like Warwick 1 with just a Ginsu's and like maybe even like a healing item. It could be RFC as well, to be honest, but even something like a healing item, like something like Hodge, there is wind of like this being like a super duper strong early game carry, and arguably one of the strongest. Obviously this is a bunch of 2 costs here, but like just a Warwick 1 can actually suffice and carry you quite heavily. If you find yourself with a lot of bows and you need an item carrier at the early game, I would actually recommend looking into Warwick here. I don't know about 4 challengers, but with Juggernauts, maybe even like Adaptive or Robotic Arm, he stacks his passive very quickly. His passive, for those of you who don't know, every attack heals him like a little bit of HP. So when you have Ginsu's plus like a healing item like BT or a Hodge, he just ramps up like crazy, as long as he's just manages to position in a way that isn't like super grief. But as long as he ramps up even a little bit, he'll be able to heal himself and just becomes almost unkillable in very interesting scenarios. It just helps that during the stun he's able to stack up his passive as well. So just something to keep in mind. Again, I don't have any experience with this, to be completely honest with you, but definitely something to consider. There's a lot of debate about how terrible Ginsu is, whether it's bad or just egregiously bad, but it's just not a great slam in general. But it's still something to consider, especially if you're trying to pivot into something like a Zir. Then maybe you can consider it, but again, just something to keep in mind. Moving on here, we do also have this rogue specific. This is actually, it looks like it's demacia centric, but it's actually qiyana 2 centric. Qiyana 2 basically just lets you play into vertical slayers or 4 rogues, so vertical rogues. Very, 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 very fun board to play. It's not something you get to play very often because qiyana 2 is sort of a very niche unit to find. You're not really playing her in Ixtal. You can sometimes if you really want to, but in general I just find that it's just not really worth it, and playing an extra Ixtal unit just doesn't feel very good. But typically you just play, this is the level 5 version of the board, but you just play something like demacia in here because Kale is your slayer. That's how you get the slayer onto the qiyana here, and eventually you can cap out, which is vertical slayers. Just to give you an idea, it's just again, it's just in the name, bunch of slayers. This is something that can really only happen either if you have a spat or if you're inside of like dreaming pool. You know, ways to get this Aatrox onto your board, definitely something to consider here. But again, it's really, really strong, really, really great board. You can even reroll for the Quinn 3, the Rek'Sai 3, which is a very much more notable board that you might know of. You reroll at 7 for this board, and it's a very, very good time. Regardless, whatever you have qiyana 2 and an early qiyana that you plan to play around, you're going to be playing around a bunch of 3 costs. Specifically, you're going to be rolling at 7 very often. You don't really ever reroll on 6. So, for example, if you don't play the vertical slayer version of this, but you instead want to play into rogues, you would find yourself with a board that looks kind of similar to something like this, and then you just 3-star this guy and 3-star this guy, and you definitely have seen this board before because it's a fucking nightmare to play into. Kale eventually becomes the Mordekaiser, right? And you know, the 4 rogue 4 slayer board, very, very standard stuff in the current meta, but this is also nightmare fuel. If you fight into anybody who has the qiyana 3, the Echo 3, and the Katarina 3, you know this is just not a great time. Just to give you an idea though, by the way, this is a game that I played literally about an hour ago, almost 2 hours ago at this point, but I had a very early qiyana 2. I tempoed with it. It's not the best during stage 2 admittedly, but during stage 3 it's very, very, very solid. And you know, you just play qiyana 3. I hit the Quinn 3 as well. I was rerolling a 7 for quite a while. It felt really, really good. 6 slayers. It's a really, really fun vertical to play into, and something that I think more people should look into. Obviously, you dropped a 2 rogue, and you managed to find yourself in this situation where you're playing vertically for the slayers, but still, great board. I'm pretty sure, by the way, I would have won out this lobby, but this guy hit 9 Bilgewater, and then this guy hit Fiora 3, so quite honestly, a third is the best we could have done in this lobby, and I'll take it. Very great. And in any regular lobby though, you know, this board probably wins out the lobby. It was just a little unfortunate. This lobby was just so strong. Moving on, finally, there are some early 3 costs to keep in mind whenever you are playing. Sometimes when you get the gold, it gives you 3 cost units, and some 3 costs are very, very notably strong and versatile, and we want to talk about those very quickly as the final or second to last category for today. So first off, let's talk about Misfortune. Misfortune is, again, if Bilgewater does get heavily nerfed, it's very possible this will not be that great, but for now we are going to talk about it because it's still really, really strong, and I don't think it'll be nerfed to the ground. And Misfortune is just such a great versatile unit that I just don't see how Bilgewater getting nerfed is going to really affect it. But nonetheless, 3 Bilgewater, 2 strategists, very straightforward. Misfortune holds our AP items such as Nashers, such as JG, such as Hodge, not really JG to be honest, but Nashers Tooth is the big one, but holds all your AP items. Really, really solid unit. She can item hold for Azir, she can item hold for even like your Neela if you want to just put attack speed items on her. Sorry, I just had like a pizza. I had it for lunch and dinner yesterday, and then I was eating like the leftovers just now because I was starting to get hungry. Your boy's tired. It's been a long day. It's been a long day. But anyway, sorry, before I got sidetracked, Misfortune can item hold for Azir, but she can actually item hold for other AP units like Kai'Sa and even Mordekaiser, so just keep that in mind. Very versatile unit. Just play strategist throughout the early mid game, pivot into Noxus or the Mordekaiser or into the Azir, where you keep playing into the strategist. Really, really great stuff. Definitely like the most versatile best unit, and actually funny enough, if you go into Dish Soap's match history, and you know what, let me just pull it up right now for you, but if we go into like Dish Soap's match history here, you can actually see that like right now currently he actually defaults Misfortune and then flexes around Misfortune and whatever he finds. So right now, rank 2 in North America, 550 LP within like the first like 2 days. Like this guy's a beast. But you can see Misfortune, Azir, this was probably around Misfortune, this was Misfortune, this was actually Noxus, but Misfortune. He has it on his board like all the time. It's definitely like Misfortune is such a terrific unit right now to play around. You can play Bilgewater, you can play Strategist, a lot of different lines, great AP item holder, just wonderful unit, so definitely keep that in mind. Next one here I want to talk about is Jayce 2. Jayce 2 is actually one of those units that like, yes, this is specifically Jayce 2. I don't think Jayce 1 is actually that great of an item holder, but if you find Jayce 2, I think you can actually tempo pretty hard with Jayce 2. I think people are sort of sleeping on Gunners because everybody looks at Gunners and they think about Aphelios, and then they go, ooh, Aphelios, yuck. But Jayce 2 is actually kind of strong. I think Jayce is sort of the underappreciated gunner out of everything. I think maybe if you've been playing a lot of set 9.5, you might have noticed a bit of a couple Jayce 3 starting to pop up. We'll talk about that a little later. But Jayce is a very solid unit, especially during the mid game, and 4 gunner is just so strong. If you get like a gunner heart or a gunner emblem, you can actually, I think, play into it if you have a decent start for it, because I think 4 gunner is just so ridiculously strong. It's actually a lot stronger than I think people realize. It's definitely something to, you know, pay attention to if you ever find yourself with a potential Jayce 3 at like 2-1 or 2-2. Finally is the demacia opener here. This is again if you want to play into the Quinn reroll potentially, or if you want just an 80 item holder, maybe pivot into something like the Fiora later on, or into vertical demacia, or just 4 challengers. Really solid way to play the early game, especially because Poppy 2 is such a menace with her radiant item. Just be careful that whenever you put items onto your Quinn here for your damage here, you do something like this, suddenly this will pop off and it'll move over to the Quinn. It's not going to be the Varpala, obviously it's going to be the Radiant Deathblade, because that's what Quinn's demacia item is now permanently. But nonetheless, just be careful. So just always make sure that if you're playing this demacia early game and you want to tempo with it, just make sure that the Poppy, like, put a chain vest or something on her. Just make sure that she actually keeps the radiant item. Finally, let's talk about piltover, because piltover is actually really important to talk about, because piltover is sort of one of those openers that has sort of changed in terms of the game plan. In a few ways, not necessarily in the early game. You're just kind of just like open sacking your board. You want to you know, try to achieve that 5 loss if you need to. You have to, but nowadays I don't actually think piltover you need to hard sack your board just to get some giga cash out and whatever and win out. This is for a couple of reasons. First one, I think Aphelios is just such a shitty unit. It's just it's very unreliable as like your cash out win out. And right now I don't know what the updated piltover tables are, but I had a game where I cashed out at like 20-25. I was down like to like the 30s of HPs, and I got a radiant item and some gold, and that just felt really bad. So I'm just saying that, like, you know, when it comes to piltover, you don't want to think about Aphelios anymore, and I think that's the big thing I really want to talk about. And the big thing I want to talk about is actually Jayce 3. Jayce 3, again, this is not really the early opening, but if you find yourself with piltover, I want you guys to understand like where you're headed with it. Right now I think Jayce 3 is sort of the strongest piltover cash out board that you can play. It's not like amazingly egregiously strong, you just win out all the time, but basically what ends up happening is that once you hit level 7 when you're playing piltover, you're usually econing the whole time. You're saving all your money throughout the entire early game, so you're able to hit level 7 pretty early on, and not only early on but pretty rich as well. And what you can actually do is that you can just, once you're level 7, which is usually on 3-5, you can just start to slow roll a little bit, you know, try to spike your board a little bit. If you happen to win, then great, that's great, but if you lose, then you keep stacking up your T-hacks, and that's okay. But basically the idea is that once you hit level 7, you just keep slow rolling, try to find that Jayce 2, try to find a Jinx 2, that Vi, the Aphelios, hopefully for like 4 gunner. Graves 2 goes on the board obviously because you need 4, and then the Echo is just a good frontliner. Obviously switch out the Echo for a Heimerdinger, but your goal is Jayce 3. You don't actually really need Jinx 3 and Vi 3. These just are, if you happen to find them, great, you can play into them. But in general, Jayce 3 is actually a very strong gunner that I think, again, not a lot of people are really playing. I think 4 gunner is very strong in the moment, so just keep it in mind. It's definitely something to consider. Vi 3 is probably the least important out of everything in here, just because your frontline can be very flexible, especially once you get a Heimerdinger. You can just do triple self repair, or actually, crazy enough, there's a guy that came by my stream earlier today who had recommended double repair on Apex turret and actually Goldenator. The idea being is that basically once the turret goes down and it starts sleeping here and it's trying to repair, again, in case you don't remember, the more repair you have, the more armor it has. It just gets tankier. It doesn't actually increase the regen time. It's always 7 seconds. Basically what they found out is that, and I think this was really cool, I tried it myself and it felt pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. The Apex turret basically sleeps, goes down, sleeps for a while, repairs, and then once it's back up, the fight's basically to the point where a lot of the units are kind of within execute range, so the turret's just able to just shoot out a couple beams, and even though they feel like not that impactful, there's actually a pretty decent chance that it'll be able to execute like 1 unit or 2 and just help speed up the fight, get that last bit of 10% damage that you're looking for. So definitely some really cool tech here. I don't know if it's going to be the go-to for piltover, but nonetheless, this double repair into Goldenator is some really interesting tech, and I really enjoyed this a lot. But anyways, that's basically it for the video, and again, I apologize for the sort of low energy, if you will. I'm exhausted. It's been like an 18-hour day. But please come by the stream, come help support it, and come hang out for the boxbox bootcamp. It's such a cool event. And again, shout out to boxbox. Thank you so much for letting me participate in it. It is such a cool thing to be a part of. I'm super excited and happy to be partaking. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and until then, I'll catch you all later. Hopefully I'll see you guys on stream. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Have a good day, and bye bye. Happy climbing.